Good afternoon. I'm Fred Kemp. I'm President and CEO of the Atlantic Council, and I'd like to welcome you all to Atlantic Council Front Page, or hashtag AC Front Page, our premier live ideas platform for global leaders. This is at the same time the newest episode of our Leaders of the Americas series. As for Atlantic Council Front Page, we have had the honor to host leaders, heads of state, heads of government, heads of international organizations from across the world in front of remarkable sizes of global audience. We have shown that there may be geographic distance in this time of COVID, but we are trying to bridge the social distance and also the political distance. In that spirit, I am delighted that we are joined here today by Mauricio Claver-Carone, President of the Inter-American Development Bank, along with other leaders of international organizations that we've hosted here. He comes to talk to us at a particularly historic moment. President Claver-Carone took over on October 1st, and this is his first public event of this sort since he took office. Prior to his election, he served as the Deputy Assistant to the President of the United States and Senior Director for Western Hemisphere Affairs at the National Security Council. Previously, he served as the United States Executive Director at the International Monetary Fund, and prior to that, as Senior Advisor for International Affairs at the U.S. Department of Treasury. As the first new IDB President for 15 years, following the long and successful tenure of Luis Alberto Moreno, who we hosted previously on this platform, President Claver-Carone has faced with the task of leading the bank during a period of heightened challenge and inequality in the region. The coronavirus pandemic continues to impose catastrophic human and economic tolls on Latin America and the Caribbean, with more than 12 million infections and nearly 500,000 deaths. The Americas now account for half of the world's fatalities from the COVID-19 pandemic. Regional economies, Latin American economies, are projected to shrink by more than 8% this year, one of the worst performances of any global region. Nations are urgently seeking assistance to lay out a recovery plan in the face of their economic contraction, which some experts project could set back the region perhaps as much as a decade in its development. International organizations such as the Inter-American Development Bank have played and will continue to play a crucial role in stimulating investment, in job creation, in long-term development, particularly in vulnerable countries, and in prioritizing the growth of small and medium-sized enterprises. We at the Atlantic Council know that working with friends and allies to secure the future is fundamental to solving all of our global challenges. Indeed, that's the Atlantic Council's founding and enduring purpose, to galvanize just that sort of common cause. Under these unprecedented circumstances, the IDB can and will play an essential role in assisting the region in navigating this tumultuous period. We are eager to hear from President Claver-Carone on his vision for how the IDB will help overcome regional challenges and achieve a more sustainable, competitive, and inclusive Latin America and the Caribbean. Before we begin, I would like to welcome Adrienne Arsht. Adrienne is the Executive Vice Chair of the Atlantic Council's Board of Directors, and she holds the extraordinary accomplishment of being the founder of two centers at the Atlantic Council, the Adrienne Arsht Latin America Center and the Adrienne Arsht Rockefeller Foundation Resilience Center. As always, Adrienne, it is an honor and a pleasure to pass to you.
Thank you, and I thank the team. I was given some talking points, and after that, I don't really need them. And besides which, I'd rather just talk about my friend Mauricio. We're fellow Miamians. When we get together, we digress and talk about art and food and people we know. I was thinking Miami is very much like the IDB. All the countries from Latin America, Central America, and the Caribbean have communities, large communities in Miami. So just living there is really great preparation for leading the IDB. But to be a bit official, since most everything has been said, but I really want to focus on the fact that I know that Mauricio's knowledge of Latin America and his real interest in the private sector and what can be done if we all work together and we bring in outside financial assistance as well, the entire region will benefit. And I'm proud to call him my friend, my somewhat fellow Miamian. I keep a foot there. And to say I really look forward to your tenure and all of us working together. So I'll now turn it, let's see, somewhere at the bottom of my talking points, it says, I now turn this back over to Jason.
Great. Thanks, Adrian. Thanks, Fred. I'm Jason Marlett, Director of the Agent Arch Latin America Center. And Mauricio, first off, thanks for joining us today for this AC front page, which, as Fred said, is, I understand, your first public event of this type since becoming IDB president. Over the next 30 minutes, we're going to look at a bunch of topics. We'll look at your strategy for engagement, IDB role in COVID recovery, employment, nearshoring, capital increase, clean energy, and infrastructure. We'll pack all that in. We'll even leave time for audience Q&A. So if you have a question, please use the Zoom Q&A function. We'll take questions at the end. Or if you're watching on another platform, please use the hashtag AC front page when sending your question with a tweet. So Mauricio, start off, you've been in the job now for just under 2 months. You've had a chance to meet with many IDB staff as well as appoint new vice presidents for the bank. What surprised you the most in learning further about the bank work and its operations so far?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, thank you, Jason. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Fred. And thank you to my friend Adrienne for the opportunity to be here. I'd like to say, you know, Miami is a city of immigrants, I being one of them. And usually a lot of them come from different parts of the region, which has really truly enriched Miami. Sometimes there's domestic immigrants too. And Adrienne came to Miami, and I can think of no other person that has enriched Miami and the lives of so many of us than Adrienne Arsht. So many of my friends, so many people, so many names you haven't heard of in my community and others, one way or another in their successful pursuits, met Adrienne Arsht along the way, and she helped them with that. And so therefore, thank you, not only on behalf of myself, but thank you on behalf of the entire community and the entire city that has really benefited from your leadership, I should say. Welcome to the IDB. I'm actually here at La Placita, which is here part of the IDB. And behind me, you have a wonderful art piece by one of the great Caribbean artists, Sheena Rose, which one of the things, as Adrienne was saying, we were digressing a little bit before in the green room, talking about the tremendous art collection that exists here at the IDB and how we want it to be a great cultural center. But anyway, don't be. I see Jason, you're going to get nervous, so I'm not going to digress anymore. I'm gonna focus in on.
It's a beautiful piece of art. A wonderful Jamaican artist, right?
Absolutely. No, actually Barbadian, my bad. I'm a Barbadian artist, and that was my bad before. And she's extraordinary, and it tells a whole story of the Caribbean. And so I would love to have you over so we can walk through it. And it's extraordinary, as is our art collection. And we're going to do a lot more. One of the things we've been talking about with our curators here of really just showcasing that art of the countries and really making also the IDB a cultural hub here for Latin America and the Caribbean here in Washington, D.C. But anyway, that's looking towards the future. What have I learned? Look, I don't want to say I've learned this. I've proved, you know, what has been said many times over, that the IDB has the most talented team of all international financial institutions, and that happens to be right. And one of the things that has been the most pleasing and the most gratifying in my short tenure has been really the eagerness which by the staff here at the IDB has really embraced my position, has embraced his presidency, and has really embraced the new energy and dynamism and the 21st century agenda that we brought to the table. I think, we've set out institutionally, and you see, I think morale has really gone up a great deal. We just did another town hall today. We do town halls every week and talk about different subjects. Last week, nearshoring. Today, we did one with our two of our four new vice presidents for them to get to know them almost personally. And it really has, I've learned so much from the team, from the knowledge that they bring forth. And one of the things that I've said and have put forward, and I think, it's a good opportunity to kind of highlight that and what have they embraced is really what I've sought to really bring to the institution. And I think that kind of is really three things and I'll be really short on these, that I've said over and over again in the campaign and otherwise. One is to really bring the brand of the IDB to the 21st century. And I know we'll talk more about this later, but it's really going to be a key part of also letting the people in the region, young, new generations, know what the IDB does for them, how it helps them, how the people on the streets, how does the IDB help you? I think there's been a stale branding of the IDB that they think about kind of 20th century, a big infrastructure project. And, and they think that, essentially this is, it's a place that's composed of, former government officials from throughout Latin America. But the IDB has such a dynamic team wanting to do so much more. And what I told them on the first day and the first message I delivered is, hey, think big. We're going to do all kinds of stuff. We're going to take more risks. We're going to do things differently, and we're going to bring and showcase your talents. But very importantly, and you see all kind of the social discontent and the social, we've seen now in Guatemala, we've seen in Peru, we've seen in Chile, we've seen last year all throughout the region. It's really going to be important to preserve the leadership of the IDB for future generations, for them to know, for people to know how we make a difference in their lives. And from a branding perspective, that's going to be really important. Also, the institutionalization. One of the things that we want to do here is what the people and the staff really wants. We want to bring greater transparency. We want to bring greater accountability. We're going to bring accessibility. Accessibility to management, to leadership is going to be huge and is a major part of that. And also, we want to bring efficiency. And that's so much needed. And one of the things that I heard the most in the campaign from the region. And the third, which has really been embraced, and I'll tell you an interesting story here, is really the fact that for the first time, people feel that for the first time since its creation, the United States actually cares about the IDB. I joked that, over the last 60 days of the campaign for the presidency, more attention had been, the IDB had gotten more attention than it had, in the previous 60 years. And frankly, that's true. And people here have felt it. The countries of the region, the staff of the IDB want the United States to participate more, to have a greater footprint, to do more. Look, the reason why there's been a lot of stereotypes written about, how I even got here and what was the point of it. And the fact is, we had not thought this out. I'm here almost providentially. It's almost happenstance. The United States had, look, I'll tell you a story. I mean, I'll give people something to write about. We had early on, and I know this intimately because I was part of the process, we had early on identified a candidate that we could get behind. And I'll tell you now, that candidate was actually Alejandro Warner. And that was in the fall of last year. That did not materialize for a couple of reasons, which I won't get into. But ultimately, as that moved forward, we started getting a sense of, from the region, a sense of concern. There was too many candidates. There was about a dozen candidates. Suddenly the Treasury Department, every model that they created for the election, you're talking about 3 rounds, and you're talking about a 4th round, nothing kind of came together. And then COVID hit, and COVID hit really hard. And it's the worst crisis as we know in the history of the region. And at that time, and after a Bloomberg article that came out and speculated about the Secretary of Treasury putting me forward to be the executive vice president of the IDB, 3 presidents in the region said, why don't you run? You should run. The region needs the United States more than ever. You should consider running. And we started making phone calls and asking. And before you knew it, here we go. Now, granted, it wasn't easy. There were some countries that didn't like it. But ultimately, 23 out of 28 countries in the region voted for me. That's more than actually in 2005 that voted for Luis Alberto Moreno in his first presidency. And what it shows is a desire for the United States to have a greater footprint, not only in the institution, but also in the region. Another thing I learned, and I'm going to shut up now, Jason, one thing you cut me off. I know I ramble. Look, one of the things that I can't tell you the number of phone calls that I get from U.S. companies, private equity firms, investors, financial institutions, you name it, saying, wow, I'm so glad that we have an opportunity to have the IDB be more of a steward to the region. We want you to help us guide us to the region. That's a great opportunity in that regards. That's something we should take advantage of. And look.
So I'm gonna jump in here. I know we have a lot to get through, but I want to ask you specifically. I want to ask you specifically about you mentioned the vote. So I want to ask you, you obviously you won the support of IDB members, but there were still about 30% of countries, 30% of the voting share of countries that abstained during the vote. So I'd love to get your thoughts on what your strategy is going to be to reach out to those countries that abstained during the vote. What have you been doing thus far, and what are your plans moving forward?
Yeah, look, I think if you look at the majority of the countries that abstained per se, so there was two countries. I think one was a misunderstanding. We've crossed those bridges. We've gotten through it. I understand their priorities. I think we share a sense of purpose. I want to work towards consensus. It kind of goes back to your first question. What have I learned about the IDB that's a little more challenging? What I've learned about the IDB is a little more challenging. I was the U.S. Executive Director of the IMF. The pathway to consensus at the IMF board was a lot simpler than I think it is here. I think it's doable, and I'm working towards it. And I think we've made a lot of progress kind of getting to know each other in that sense to get to that. And I think that the approval of the vice presidents was an important step forward. I think also, the conversations we're having on a capital increase are important steps forward. Yeah. I think there's paths.
We'll get to the capital increase.
Let me just say, Jason, I think there's paths of convergence, which we've really worked hard towards. I think the European countries were trying to just kind of stay out of it and figure out where they're going. I think that was a large percentage of it. The European countries are very focused on climate issues. And I think I've been proving to them that so are we. And actually, we have some pretty big initiatives on climate that we're going to release and make some history here at the IDB in that regards. But that aside, I think that the challenge sometimes here at the IDB that I didn't see per se at the IMF is there's a little bit more politics. Right. And I've said, and I'll shut up with this, that, the success of us here, the cohesive, cooperative success of us as a cooperative, that's what the IDB is, success of us here is going to be based on PPPs. And, but on the right PPPs. So there's public-private partnerships. If we focus on that, we're going to win. If we focus on power, patronage, and politics, we're going to lose. Yeah. So my whole thing, I've said the success is going to be on which PPP we focus on. And I think this is the PPP that we're going to. The other thing I've said, let's keep the politics at the OAS. That's the most important thing. This is, to kind of make a Latin joke, this is Calle 13. This is literally Calle 13 here. We're in New York Ave and Calle 13. Let's here focus on how to help people's lives in the region, how to focus on economic growth and development, and let's leave the politics for 17th Street at the OAS.
So I got one politically oriented question, and before we go into some of the work, but people, of course, are watching from all around the hemisphere. But of course, here in Washington, we're in the midst of a political transition. So I'd like to get your perspective on working with the incoming Biden administration. A tweet from the IDB on November 10th expressed your congratulations to President-elect Biden, Vice President-elect Harris, and you highlighted 4 specific ways in which you hope to work with the new administration. We've talked about some of them already: promoting economic growth and job creation, mitigating effects of climate change, improving governments, and supporting a rapid recovery from COVID. Given you are nominated by President Trump, what will be your strategy to work with the incoming Biden administration on these critical issues? Yeah,
well, let me kind of take that backwards. First of all, I was nominated by the United States to run for president of the IDB. I was also nominated by Guyana, Haiti, El Salvador, Paraguay, and Israel. I'm the only president that's actually been nominated by essentially every segment, every sub-region in that sense, which I was really humbled by. So I'm really a candidate of all those countries. Obviously, I'm American. I'm very proud to be a candidate of the United States. I think the opportunity is huge. And I think that I know that I am when that tweet came out, I am the first and only president of an international financial institution to officially congratulate the president-elect. And in that sense, I meant it. I have a deep devotion for the rule of law and democracy. I think anybody that knows me throughout my career knows that. You can agree with me or disagree with me on certain issues, but the focus of it has been the rule of law and democracy, and I'm very committed to that. I think there's a huge opportunity here, and I've been following, and I saw the president-elect's unity speech after his election. And look, I'm inspired by that as much as everyone. And I think that there's a real opportunity here to show the region. There is no other issue where we can have a bipartisan agenda to show the world, to show the region that we care about economic growth, development, climate, inclusion, all of those issues, and have an effect amidst the worst crisis in the history of the region than working together towards that degree. I think we will successfully do that. I think it's good policy for the United States. I think it's a good message for the region. I think it's good politics as well, to be quite honest. Let's be honest. I think there was a lot of skepticism we saw in Florida and elsewhere in regards to in Latin American communities, in regards to the direction of a new administration. What a great way to show not only throughout the region, the United States, et cetera, that we speak as one voice towards Latin America and the Caribbean than dealing with these issues. And let me tell you something. Let's think of the scope, the magnitude of the challenge at hand. In the 61 years of the IDB, this COVID crisis is the worst economic outlook for the region in its history. You have the worst climate outlook. You've had the worst season for natural disasters, hurricanes, et cetera. 4 out of the 5 countries that are most affected by natural disasters are right here in Central America and the Caribbean. And you have the worst migration crisis in history with Venezuela on the scale of that of Syria. If we don't work together to move past those issues, and the IDB can play a key and central role together, and by the way, that's also why we need a capital increase, then we're missing a huge opportunity here. I think we can lock arms. And by the way, on Central America, I said in an interview previously now at CNN, if the president-elect wants to work on a new alliance for prosperity, a 2.0, I have it in the drawer of my desk. I talked to Alicia Bárcena for Sapal about us getting together and joining initiatives. IDB played an important role in the first one. I think we can do something bigger, better, and more effective, particularly at this time.
So Mauricio, let's go into the challenges in the region. So your Latin American economies are projected to shrink by more than 8% this year due to COVID-19. Unemployment will reach 14%. 38% of the population are projected to fall back into poverty. Then to combine on top of that, rising debt levels, tightening fiscal positions, health, socioeconomic, other development challenges. We've been working at the Atlantic Council together with the IDB on a scenario planning work. We'll have a forthcoming report deeply focused on some of these issues. Let's just start with your broad overview of how you see the role transforming and the role of the IDB transforming to help the region rebuild from the pandemic, but not just rebuild, but rebuild in a way that actually further accelerates growth and actually can use this moment as one to potentially even leapfrog and its development. What do you see from a broader perspective, the role of the IDB in helping the region?
Yeah. So look, we don't need to restate the diagnostics of how bad things are. We get it. So what I've said, and I said it on the first day, where are the opportunities? And let's find the opportunities and let's focus in on them and see how we can help the region recover. In the short term, what we'd have identified as essentially the focus of this presidency is job creation. There's nothing that can have a greater social, economic impact on peoples and their families and their livelihoods than job creations. And what are the opportunities that exist? Looking at the glass half full, the opportunities that immediately exist and so doing, ironically, due to the pandemic, and we can go more into that, are digitalization, small, medium-sized enterprise financing, particularly for vulnerable and disadvantaged groups, particularly for women who have the least access to financing, but yet are the most successful entrepreneurs in the region, and then nearshoring. And nearshoring is a huge opportunity in the short term, $80 billion opportunity. On all of those, we are working. By the way, those all fit. One of the things you'll see here is that we're at IDB. I've learned, going back to your first question as well, is that we're very methodic. We have an institutional strategy, and we follow that institutional strategy very carefully. All of those are new versions, are new subgroups that fit within that institutional strategy, where the opportunities lie, and we can have the greatest impact on people's lives. I've said this over again. What is the secret sauce for the success of the United States and for it being the largest and most dynamic economy in the world? It's 3 things, as you know. People talk about U.S. foreign investment, but people forget that we are the largest recipient of foreign investment in the world. People talk about small, medium-sized businesses. They are the core of our economy. And then historically, the whole notion of labor flexibility and mobilization, we always think about in the 60s, 70s, people picking up with a station wagon, moving from one state to another where the job opportunities lie. Those are the opportunities for the region now. Nearshoring is essentially the foreign direct investment and how to take those opportunities, particularly as there's now the corporate will. Politically, we've seen that will before, but as companies are looking to bring in their supply chains closer to home, as they're looking to really recreate them, and the will's there, and we can talk more about nearshoring after. In regards to small, medium-sized enterprises, they're also the heart of economies and job creations in the region. We're talking about Central America now because obviously they're hit by the hurricane. 70% of jobs in Honduras are created by small, medium-sized businesses. And digitalization is the labor mobility market access flexibilization of the 21st century. It was very difficult for people in Latin America and the Caribbean that have been for centuries in a town or have been, and have, deeper roots than we have here with that mobilization to really pick up and move their family, except obviously those in extreme need that need to, as we've seen historically. But now they have they have the ability to telework. They can have the ability to sell products online. They can have the ability to do all that, but you can't do that if you don't have connectivity. And you need rural connectivity, you need better connectivity, you need more price competitive connectivity, you need more quality connectivity. And so the infrastructure around digitalization is key. And those are things that we're going to be strongly focused on in the short term that can have a tremendous impact in the reconstruction and recovery.
So I'd like to get into a little bit more on nearshoring, and we'll go to digitization. But on nearshoring, very, very incredible opportunity for the region right now. Companies are looking to diversify their supply chains. They're looking to bring supply chains back home. What type of opportunities do you see specifically for the IDB to accelerate the nearshoring potential in the region? And frankly, this is not a moment that's going to last forever, right? I mean, this is a unique moment in time where there's a lot of discussion about nearshoring. So, what is your vision of how the IDB can capture this moment in time to accelerate the potential of nearshoring?
The IDB is uniquely positioned to be the champion for nearshoring. I tried to create certain initiatives to do so when I was in the U.S. government, and that's impossible. And it's impossible for regardless of party, Republican, Democrat, et cetera, because reshoring is always going to be the priority. And I get it. That makes sense. And by the way, not just for the United States. If you ask President Lopez Obrador whether he wants, jobs created in Mexico or in Guatemala, he's always going to say Mexico. Or Duque, you say Colombia or Ecuador, he's going to say Colombia. So that's just natural. We can help the countries that have done their homework, that, we've already through our sector side have been partners in the creation of the investment development agencies in all of these countries to help them really create the standards and infrastructure in order to attract that investment. Some countries have really done a lot of work in this regards already, but we can also now add and create a new toolkit that includes incentives to do so. We saw Japan. In Japan, when they created $1 billion instrument in order to reshore and nearshore companies that were, and by the way, this isn't just about China, India, et cetera, from China to Japan or other ASEAN countries, they had 100 companies that did so. There was a recent study now in China that said 75% of U.S. companies in China are looking to relocate or would consider relocating. That's a unique opportunity that exists in that regards. And again, this is not a China issue. This could be China, India, and look, Ford just announced a new plant that it is opening up in Uruguay that's creating 2,000 jobs in Uruguay. They just announced it today. That was an expansion that was supposed to take place in Turkey, and they decided to do it in Uruguay. That's 2,000 quality jobs that are going to be created there with an extraordinary opportunity to do so. And by the way, that financing instrument in Japan, which was less than $1 billion, that's 100 companies. So think about essentially the scale of that and what it means and for every dollar. We can do the same thing. We're planning to present an initiative to our board with a toolkit that we can present to the private sector. Actually, next week, we're hosting a big dialogue with companies, U.S. companies and companies from throughout the region to explain the opportunities that exist in nearshoring. Let me give you just a number, which we're going to release. In the short term, nearshoring represents an $80 billion opportunity for Latin America and the Caribbean. There is nothing else out there right now that in the short term would have a greater impact on people's lives and job creation, and therefore from there, formalization. I mean, think about the development impact. I've had this discussion with some of our European colleagues because they think it's kind of a geopolitical debate. And I tell them it's not geopolitical. Look, yeah, sure, there's obviously a lot of these companies were in China, but it's not geopolitical. Think about the development impact that we can have. First of all, you can do strategic nearshoring in underdeveloped areas where vulnerable populations exist. You can also have tremendous impact in regards to governance. Who are better ambassadors of good transparency, governance, and those standards than U.S. companies and the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act in that regards. I mean, it just scales across of what that could be created. There's no single greater opportunity in the short term to really help across the board the region than taking advantage of this nearshoring because they want it. And by the way, and what I say and what I discuss and have good conversations with our European friends on in this regard is like, look, we're just jealous. I mean, think of it. 65% of all European commerce is intra-regional. 55% of all Asian commerce is interregional. You know what percentage of Latin American commerce is interregional? 15%. 15%.
Yep.
Think about what we're leaving on the table. Huge opportunity. We got to take advantage.
You compound that as well. The U.S. has more free trade partners in Latin America than any other region of the world. And you're mentioning informality, which is a incredibly important issue to address, because informality has affected some of the close to 60% of the population works in the informal sector in the region, and these are some of the most vulnerable workers all across the region that have felt most profoundly some of the impacts of COVID. Mauricio, I'll move on to digitalization.
Those formal jobs create obviously greater fiscal intake, which creates greater social services. And this is one of those areas where this presidency is uniquely positioned to be a guide. These companies are saying, help us figure out what these opportunities are. Some of these funds and everything have to invest in only OECD countries. As you know, there's only 4 of those. But hey, we have 26 borrowing nations. There's huge opportunities in the other 22s, and we can create a brand. I want to create an IDB brand for good investment practices that we can help U.S. companies really decide, and just like they do, and they have like OECD as a standard, that they can have the IDB as essentially that badge, that brand of know-how and guide of where to invest and how to invest.
Mauricio, you were talking about digitalization before. And there's a recent IDB, Microsoft, Inter-American Institute for Cooperation and Agricultural Study mentioned 77 million people in rural areas in the region that have no internet access. And it's more than 1 in 10 people across the region that don't have internet access. To be able to compete insofar as nearshoring as well, especially in this increasingly digitized world, and to be able to foster greater economic development, overcoming this digital deficit is imperative. So I'd like to, and actually I'll bring in a question that came in over the chat on this as well, which is relevant. A question from Angela Melguizo, who mentions that AT&T plans to launch HBO Max in Latin America 2021, the first region outside the US. And he's asking as well, what are the IDB plans to support the digital economy, and how can the creative industry also be an engine of inclusive growth? So his question relates to mine, which is also, what is specifically do you see as the role of the IDB in helping to overcome some of this digital divide?
Huge. So I think that there's three answers to your question. First is in regards to the infrastructure. Hey, look, we need to have greater connectivity, and we know the impact of it. 10% deeper, greater connectivity in a country can mean 3.5% greater GDP in a year. I mean, think it's not a year, let's be honest, it's in a 2 or 3 year span. So, I mean, the impact is humongous. So we need to work first and foremost on ensuring that the infrastructure is there. And by the way, it's not just for greater connectivity and obviously focusing on rural areas, but also price and quality, huge. Those are going to be really important. And I think we are out in the field, and we're focused on increasing and focusing in on that digital infrastructure and how we can work with companies to do so, how we can invest with it through our private sector instruments, through IDB Invest, and otherwise. What you talked about in regards to the creative sectors, that's what we call the orange economy. And the orange economy was actually something that when Colombian President Duque was actually here at the IDB, when he worked at the IDB, that he was a champion of, and he actually wrote a book about the orange economy.
I've read his book.
Yeah, hey, let me tell you something. What a huge opportunity. We want to do Orange Economy 2.0. I want to take this on overdrive. People have seen, I've now, people have said, they've called me like the J Balvin president, because I've said this example so many times. Look, the talent in the region, countries like Colombia, Uruguay, Argentina, others, in regards to the digital sphere, to the creative sectors, are huge. That should be also a nearshoring market. J Balvin, the entire McDonald's campaign, there's been 3 international spokespeople for McDonald's in their marketing campaigns in history: Michael Jordan, Travis Scott, and J Balvin. J Balvin was in his house in Medellin, says, I can't travel in order to do this marketing campaign. So guess what? All of the digital production work, which they would have done in New York, LA, et cetera, Miami, they did it in Medellin. And it was amazing. And everyone was like, wow, look at the digital talent that exists there. We should be nearshoring all of that digital work. Sony, Universal, et cetera, should all be doing the work, particularly for Latin artists, but for any artist, they can be doing it in the region. It's a huge opportunity for growth in that regards. I actually just met recently with the CEO of the Latin Grammys. My dream is that within the next 5 years, I want the Latin Grammys for the first time to be held in Latin America and the Caribbean. There's complexities to it, and we'll get there, and I have a whole plan of how we do it. But more importantly, between now and then, How can we launch an initiative so that artists in a favela, artists in a poor neighborhood in Lima, in Bogota, in Mexico City, how they can figure out that infrastructure in order for intellectual property rights of how to get the recordings, et cetera. That helps people's lives. That improves their lives dramatically. I was also recently with the founder of, actually mutual friend of Adrienne and myself, of Emerge, which brings together all of the talented tech entrepreneurs from the region. We have our incubator here, IDB Lab, for tech growth. How we can create a fund perhaps that we can go out there and the ones that have the most development impact. It's an efficient, effective, low-cost way to really help improve people's lives, to put them into the world, to create employment opportunities, to formalize it. It's a huge opportunity. And I'm sorry, I get really excited about these things because, there's nothing worse than you're seeing that apple that's like hanging from the tree and it's so juicy and it's right there and you just want to just jump at it, grab it and eat it. And that's what we have to do. And if we miss this opportunity and we don't focus on the right PPPs and we focus on the wrong PPPs, we're going to miss it.
So Mauricio, we've been talking about a lot of things that the IDB can do, your vision of a lot of things that you want to do. You've also said that the region will need about $20 to $25 billion annually in lending for its COVID recovery. And not all that, of course, will come from the IDB, but nonetheless, you've also been very vocal already about securing a capital increase for the IDB to support the region's recovery. I want to ask you a two-part question on the capital increase. One is, given budget constraints in the U.S., how will you work to secure the support from U.S. Congress on a capital increase? And at the same time, the likelihood of financial support from the bank's other donors, because a capital increase doesn't just come from the United States, it has to come from donors, other member countries, with most of those major economies in the region, all those major economies, frankly, facing incredible fiscal constraints at this moment. So I'd love to get your thoughts on how you plan on working with the U.S. Congress, the capital increase, as well as working with other member countries.
Yeah. So look, just to once again establish a sense of common sense, we're talking about COVID, the worst economic crisis in the 61-year history of the bank and the region. We're talking about the worst season for natural disasters, and it's only going to increase and get worse because the reality is the waters are getting warmer. We're seeing that. And third, the largest migration crisis with less international response in our history. And as you know, and let me take this opportunity to repeat the number because it's frankly embarrassing. In the Syrian refugee crisis, per refugee, the international community donated $1,500. In regards to the Venezuelan refugee crisis, it's $125. So a crisis of equal scale, but yet a small fraction of a response. And the United States has been by far the largest donor, but a lot more needs to be done. So you have all of these things, and we have these immediate crises, and then you have contingencies. We put forward in the concept note that we put forward to our board of directors that the needs of the region we believe to be about $25 billion per year. And by the way, that also includes infrastructure for health. Think about the COVID crisis. Think about any health ministry you have been to in the region. They're dilapidated. Countries in the region have spent no money on their health ministries ever. Very little, very few. Now you're talking about a whole infrastructure surrounding health as well, because we've seen the devastating effects that could have had. So you have all these compounded needs. We know it's about $25 billion. Now, is the IDB supposed to fill all $25 billion? No, probably not. But we're at $12 billion currently, and we do believe that we can get to $20 billion. And now, so the argument is there. The argument should not be that difficult. Here in the United States, look, the reality is you cannot name in the history of the IDB a congressional champion for funding IDB capital. It's never happened. I'm hoping that we can do so. And I think we're going to see some champions because I think the opportunity is there. And I think more than that, the lesson was learned of what happens when we're not there. Other countries, other entities are going to fill the gap. And look, let me just be clear here. And this is not I've said it. I don't make any discussion about China with prejudice towards China in that regards. But the reality is that China became a lender, an important lender towards the region when the United States and the IDB and a lot of institutions essentially took a step back. And here in the IDB, let's be honest, when IDB Invest merged out in 2015, who took that space? China took that space. When I first walked into the Treasury Department in 2017, I was handed to me that the 60th anniversary meeting for the IDB annual meeting was going to be in Chengdu, China. It's a lovely place. I have no prejudice towards it in that regards. But the 60th anniversary of an institution that was created here in Washington, D.C., why is it going to be in China in that regards? Because they filled a gap. And you know what? I get it. But we can't let that happen again. The United States, this is the Western Hemisphere. The region wants the United States to step up. They want the IDB to step up. We are their preferred partners. The United States are their preferred partners. If not, that's going to be filled elsewhere. I don't think that's precisely what the region wants because there's different contingencies and conditions that comes with a lot of that lending. This is their money. 50.1% of the shareholding here at the IDB belongs to the region. 30% is the United States, and the other 20% is the rest. It's an investment. So you're not even spending money. When you do a capital increase, you're investing in an institution that is lending and you're going to get your money back. And your money is going to be right here. There could be no greater investment during this historic time of crisis than investing in the IDB with the culture of transparency, accountability that we're fomenting, with the greater U.S. footprint and interest that we're fomenting. It's consistent with the original intent of the IDB, and we have an opportunity to do so. And we now have an opportunity to do so in a bipartisan fashion. And what a greater message the United States can send to the region than if we do so, and we do so successfully and move out of this crisis successfully. And guess what? By 2025, if we can say, which is when my term is over, if we can say, hey, we didn't have another lost decade in Latin America, guess what? We did something good.
Mauricio, we have just a few more minutes. There's a question here from Alex Segura from Hanse from FA, who asked specifically if you've talked with President-elect Biden and if you're working with his transition team. And he also is asking, what are the most important topics do you think the U.S. should focus on in the future with regard to the region? Yeah.
Hey, so I have not spoken to President-elect Biden himself. Obviously, I do know people in the transition within the sphere. I think that it's going to be very important that we all work together and focus in. What we have to be cautious of and careful of. And look, I get it. There's a lot of noise created in this campaign, and there's a lot of political rhetoric that goes around it. Let me just give a word of caution. This is not the OAS. This is a bank, and we lend based on our credit rating. So when the political rhetoric that would go into other things hit the bank, it affects our governance, and it ultimately affects our credit rating. So we need to send messages of unity, and we need to send messages of working together, and on issues like we did. I know that a priority for the Biden administration, I've heard it from the Hill and from their allies, is climate. It's also a priority for me. It's also a priority for European nations. Guess what? IDB doesn't have a climate facility. Do we want to have our own climate facility? That's a great reason you need to have a capital increase. I think we need to focus in and work on that, because we are going through a recovery and a reconstruction. And if we want to have a greener, better reconstruction in order to help the region overcome not only the present needs, but to make sure that we're being resilient towards the future, we need to figure out a way to do that. This is a great opportunity to do so and work together in this regards. But again, I think it's really important that we have and define unifying agendas, that we don't let political rhetoric get in the way of working with a bank, because if so, it's going to constrict our lending abilities. Instead of increasing our capital, it's going to end up because of our credit rating and the huge pressures. Think about the pressures that are currently existing on our credit rating as a result of the downgrades of countries in the region of over 50% of our shareholding. If we add to that with political rhetoric here in the United States, it only affects our lending ability, it only hurts real people in the region, and it only affects what's our joint mission. So I call here for a message of unity to focus in on job creation, job growth, economic development, inclusion, climate, and look, digitalization, small, medium-sized enterprises, nearshoring. Obviously, politically, that's a little tougher, but we'll take the heat on that one, and great opportunity there.
A clean energy facility. I mean, that is something that's incredibly needed.
Think about it. We don't have one. We actually have probably the most cutting edge ESG standards, right? So the environmental sustainability governance standards that we've created. We're very proud of that brand here at the IDB, and it's really been renowned in the markets. But we depend for our financing for climate projects. We depend on the Green Climate Fund and other environmental facilities that are not our own. We need to have our own. A capital increase would go a long way towards that. And we've been talking to our European friends and partners in that regards.
Mauricio, thank you so much for joining us today for your first large public
I know the 2 hours to go.
we probably could have talked all evening, but we're limited to 45 minutes. So thank you very much for joining us.
Adrienne knows I'm capable of that. Of talking all the.
Well, thank you. The IDB is such an important institution, and look forward to more work with the IDB moving forward. So thanks for joining us today for this conversation.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.